Okay, I'm Gene Massey, and I'm the only thing between you and the cocktails. This is a very important panel because if you don't have any marketing, what's going to happen to you is what happened to a friend of mine. A friend of mine posted his offering on a portal and got nothing because they had no money left after they did their Reg CF compliance. They had no money left, and it was a failure. So they spent $20,000 complying with the regulations in order to be on a portal for Reg CF, and they got only $6,000 on the portal, and they couldn't even keep that because that didn't meet their goal. So what you're going to hear today from these gentlemen is extremely important because you won't be a successful crowdfunder if you aren't a good marketer. And so I guess we'll start with you, Peter, and just introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your company.
Thanks, Gene. So Peter Goldstein, Alchemy Capital. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. Throughout those 30 years, I've been a company builder, investor, merchant banker, and licensed as an investment banker and broker-dealer for many years. I'm currently working as an advisor with early-stage emerging growth companies that have an interest in crowdfunding. So we'll work with them on a Title III, we'll work on a 506, and of course we'll work on the Reg A. And I've got experience with all three of those, both as an issuer and as a broker-dealer.
Sure. My name is Hugh Austin. I'm with a company called Small Cap Nation / Corporate Connect. We're a video-centric, New York City-based, create content on a video-centric platform. We shoot our stuff, majority of it in NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, predominantly, I'd say 60-40 public-private companies.
Yeah, my name is David Metzler. I am a background of investment banking, venture capitalist, and I've started and raised $30 million for my last two companies. I'm now doing bridge loans into Title III and Reg A deals, so we provide that capital necessary for them to launch their campaign successfully. So really excited to be here.
Well, I guess the first thing we would start with, Peter, is a lot of people, because this is relatively new, a lot of people make mistakes when they're crowdfunding. And you being a consultant that helps people through these different offerings, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that people make?
Yeah, there seem to be a number of those, and I think a lot of those are because people want to learn as they go along. So the first one to me is preparation. You know, there's a tremendous amount of work that has to go into preparing your offering. And it starts really with the story and the communication. You need to have a very succinct, very clear communication that people can relate to. It needs to be relatable. It needs to be something that people can resonate with. So preparation from the beginning of the onset, and that leads into your strategy. So your strategy has to include things like your capital structure. You know, what is your sustainability plan? What is the ROI for investors? You know, what is your marketing plan? And all of these things need to be integrated, and each one of them is their own specific game plan. So a lot of the mistakes I see that people make is they want to rush. They want to move really, really quickly through all these things. And if you get all of those right, you're in position for great success.
Have you found sometimes people won't listen to you?
As an advisor, it's my #1 pet peeve.
Yeah.
You know, I've got 30 years of experience, successes and failures. And I've learned more from my failures than I probably have from my successes.
Me too.
And even as right now, we have a Reg A client that is wanting to do things his way and not listen to the advice. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard when a company enters into this arena, which is new for all of us, but those of us who are here have a particular level of expertise. And when you bring that expertise to a client and they don't listen to it, makes it very hard.
So that could be the biggest mistake a client could make, is not listening to the people that they hired to help them.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then I think from there it's, you know, because there's so many different ways you can reach your audience through equity crowdfunding, is you need to do a lot of testing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and David does a lot of that in his work, where you're actually looking to test the viability of your crowdfunding. What is the cost per acquisition? What's working? What's not working, more importantly. And then put your resources towards those items that are working that you can measure. So measure would be the next portion of what I see is, this is all measurable. The old adage, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Right.
So I think that really applies here to companies when they're thinking about their campaign. Because the biggest mistake, the biggest fallacy that I would say is people still believe you can put it up on the internet and it'll sell itself. So I've been in selling securities for 30 years.
Right.
I've never seen one sell itself. And one of my mentors on Wall Street is a rough and tumble guy, but he says, you can put your offering out there and nobody cares.
That's right.
And throughout all these years, I've learned to realize that it's true. You have to sell the securities. So I look at this as a product launch.
Yeah.
You're launching a product.
Right.
And you have to look at all the different aspects.
Sure.
So you go through all those things, right? You prepare, you have your strategy, you test, you measure, you have to follow through, and then you have to convert. So the next biggest mistake for me is conversion. People don't realize that when all these leads come in through the marketing and through the advertising and through your agencies, well, who's converting them and what's the plan to convert?
Right. Now, Hugh, you do something very similar and work with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Sure.
What do you do when you're in trouble in an offering?
When I'm in trouble, well, again, it's pretty...
Maybe you're never in trouble. You're
Yeah,
always
well, I haven't done enough offerings, but I run in, I think a lot of the things that Peter's talking about and you're mentioning, it's still crowdfunding or not, you're still trying to, just like a product, you're trying to launch, in this case, your company, whether it's whatever the service is. It's still really important, and that's what at SCN, what we do is we start with the messaging, right? You can have an entrepreneur, you can have a traditional business that's trying to get into the space, but you still have to get the messaging done. And that's one thing that we deal with, and we're pretty strong on that. There's certain bases that you still need to cover. I kind of look at this, years ago in football, you had the 5 receiver set, everything changed, but at the end of the day, if you see the evolutions, it's back to, a fullback and a run. It's back to the basics. You got to block and tackle. So I think in this business, you have to tell your message, and you have to be pretty succinct about it. The other thing that both you gentlemen talked about, you definitely have to manage the expectations. If you take a client on, and I think Erwin talked about it before, if you take a client on, and I've been in this business long enough, and I started in the ad agency business. If you have a client and their expectations, and then I think, in this case, Darren and I had a client that, I had him in front of 32 family offices, and he thought he was worth 2 or 3 times what the rest of the world does. And that's okay, and I got paid, but at the end of the day, is that a success? So what you would rather do is be with clients that, you're at least, you're starting from the same end zone.
Well, you have an advantage in that you've got some relationships with from family offices.
Correct.
Now, have you found that a family office will actually look at some of these new investments?
I've been working with Darren. I actually had a call today where I've got one of his companies, Myomo, that might get a family office placement, which would be great. It's actually overseas. But again, just because these people are super wealthy doesn't mean they didn't get there.
They didn't get there being stupid. Yeah.
Correct, and I think in the case, if you go to a family office, and I've been working with them now for 4 years, it's a different set. And I think you have to go in there with a certain approach. It's not you're not going in there like you're meeting with 800 people. They want to be special. You talk about impact, and those are factors. But at the end of the day, they're very intelligent business people.
Some money
they want to make money, and they, unlike a fund or an institution, they don't have to. They have a lot of money. They don't have to make 10 investments a year.
Right.
So you have to make a real good case. And again, the one thing I'd say for any of the entrepreneurs in the space, if you're going to really go after the family offices, besides, you better be honest and you better have your facts straight. It really has to do a lot with the jockey. They're looking at the woman or the man who's running the company. They place a lot of credibility in that, a lot of weight.
Now, David, you're my new best friend because if only I'd known you before, I could have introduced you to my friends that had no money for an ad campaign.
I get that a lot.
If only they'd known. You have got something that's, I think, truly remarkable and innovative, and that you can actually provide money to a company that's a startup that doesn't have any money, right? And we want to tell us about that, how you can provide an ad budget and how you test and tell us the whole story?
I'd love to give you some color. So I get that all the time, actually. I wish I'd met you before, because a lot of companies start off the process, let's say it's a Reg A, they look ahead and they have a sunk cost of $50K for your legal, you got $15K for your accounting, and then you get started on your marketing budget. So most of my referrals come from legal accountants across the country that give me their business because they get across that line and they say, hey, we need money now, because they didn't recognize that it takes money to make money. And so I started going around speaking over the last year at all these events and realized there was a need for a bridge capital for that marketing spend. And so once we came up with that, I needed to really curate all the best resources I could. So I started working with agencies like Darren, who's one of the best agencies in the industry and in the country. And we have 4 or 5 agencies that are our go-to agencies. So once we knew that the distribution was going to be in the hands of professionals, then the next part of the loan and making sure my investors are taken care of is really understanding ahead of time, are these loans going to work or not? And so we spent 9 months really researching and working with other academic experts on a system where we could proxy ahead of time the success of a loan. So what we ended up doing is developing what's called a scorecard. So for $10,000, roughly, we can get out what would normally cost you 25 grand for an issuer. We'll get an agency to go through and do a full process for you, and at the end of that process,
Testing effectively.
they'll test it, and with that comes an ad spend, and we actually can measure that ad spend, look at the results of that ad spend, and based on that ad spend, make a decision on if it's a good investment from the fact that it has a low CPA of cost per acquisition for investors. So it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to run through that process. It's a full-on marketing campaign. It drives live investors through, and at the end of that, there's an actual number that comes out of that we can make a decision off of. Okay. And actually, I think that's really where most people should start. A lot of times you're starting with a legal and accounting under the belief structure that your Reg A or your marketing is going to work. Right. And I'd love to see every company start with a $10,000 test, go to Darren and say, hey, will this work or will this not work? And at the end of that, Darren can tell you it will, and now you're moving forward with an educated set of metrics and a decision that now is informed and without a sunk cost ahead of it.
Okay, so you do let's say I give you $10,000. You do a test with Darren, who's the smartest guy in the country, and halfway through, you determine my cost per acquisition. It looks great. You go to your people and you decide you're going to do the loan. You loan me $100,000, okay? And about 3 weeks into it, I get sued because one of my employees did whatever, or they found out that we've got something, and anyway, we get sued. What happens to the $100,000? Does the company still owe you that money?
Yeah, so the way we set it up is in the best party interest of all parties, we fund directly into the marketing agency. So that covers the cost of their marketing budget and the ad spend. So our goal is not to fund companies. Our goal is to give them the critical capital so that they can get funded. So in that scenario, we had loaned 100 grand. We had wired that money over to Darren. Darren's already in motion with his marketing campaign. And then we end up in a situation where there's a lawsuit. That's a pretty tricky situation. That's the reason why there's a high risk, high reward scenario.
Let's just say everything looked great, but it just didn't. Some reason didn't work out. What happens?
Yeah. So our goal is really to use the scorecard up front to metric up, if it's going to work out from a marketing, and we're pretty good at telling if it will work or not. So with that scorecard, we can make that decision on if the marketing part will work. Now, you're talking about side material
if it doesn't work, if I don't get it and it goes south, what do we do?
Right. So there's no recourse in our scenario towards the company or towards the officers of the company. So the way we
you're on the hook for it, in other words.
Yeah. So our capital is really performance-based capital. We only get paid out of escrow. So if the company funds, we get paid, and if the company doesn't fund, we don't get paid.
But you take first dollar too, don't you?
We're first money out of escrow because that's the risk-reward profile. So our risk is that something could happen and sideline a deal all the way through, a lawsuit that we didn't foresee. Our reward is we're first money out, but now the company's left with critical capital in their bank account to go on and fund the rest of their ad spend until they get all the way subscribed.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like a great deal to me. Peter, what do you think are some of the marketing trends that are happening in the business now? I mean, we've all seen these wonderful new models of people trying different methods and Facebook ads and all kinds of different models for marketing. What do you see as the trend towards the future?
That's a great question. I mean, in reality, it's an evolution. You know, there's no perfect answer here. I think part of the trend is that there'll be a series of best practices. You know, this is early, so people are going to get flushed out. Again, back to what's working, what's not working. So those best practices will
My friend
be,
got flushed out.
right. Unfortunately,
He didn't have any money, you know.
right, and that's one of them. So you know, you can't raise money without resources, and I think some of these lessons that are being learned are going to come back to best practices. So whether you're going on with a platform through a Title III, or whether you're going to do it as a company issue, where you're going to use a broker-dealer, then you also have to look at the plethora of what's out there. But one of the trends clearly is that these things don't get done by themselves. So the best practices are going to emerge. I think some new technologies will emerge in how to have deeper analytics, how to really have the diagnostics to be able to show, okay, here's your playing field.
It's becoming a data game, isn't it?
It is, but the last one for me is the marriage of the old school and the new school. So I think one of the trends and one of the things that I think is really missing in that sector right now, you know, are the old school, the dinosaurs like me, who have been selling securities for 30 years, who can marry proven, you know, ways of deploying and raising capital, okay, with the digital marketing expertise of the agencies and the way to reach new audiences. And so the trend that I see is just the reality that one of those by itself isn't perfect, the other one certainly has a lot of weaknesses, and so if you marry the two, I think you come up with a much higher probability of success.
Okay, now here's a question for anyone that wants to take it. Of course, in the old days, you had a broker-dealer that would call you up and say, George, I've got a thing for you here. I've got some really good deal for you. I just came across this, and then basically they would sell you the deal to someone that didn't know anything about it. Now, there are opportunities that you can see entirely on the internet, and there is no guy you can call up. The door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesmen are gone. And is that ever going to happen to securities? Do you feel like that's ever going to happen, where it becomes totally electronic, where you see everything on there, and the thought of calling up a guy for me, I still like to call somebody. Is this really good vacuum cleaner, you know? I still kind of miss that before. I want somebody's opinion now. You can see those kind of opinions on Amazon, and you know, you can see how many people liked it or didn't like it. Do you think that's going to happen with securities, where they completely obsolete the brokers? Anybody?
Securities guy,
So I would say no, and I would say Peter already said the answer that I think is the future innovation of this marketplace, which is the tip of the spear is your marketing, and then behind that are guys that know how to close on the phone with a unified message around it all, right? So right now, there's no one example of that being out there where the marketing firm and the brokers are in the same place with the same message and the same uniform conversion conversation. And so I don't foresee the brokers going away. I see them taking on a different role where they are now the closers of any leads that come in from a sophisticated marketing campaign. Because if you look at examples, no one deal yet has really closed significantly outside of real estate without the help of a broker-dealer. So I think Peter already described the future of innovation. As a matter of fact, a lot of people talk to us about doing that. So that's a model that
It's a
people should
hybrid,
take on.
you'd say.
It will be a hybrid.
All of them are going to be hybrids.
Because it's technology products. It's not real estate. Real estate has a set governance and understanding with finite.
Yeah, you can see
you
loan
know,
to
property
value and things
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
there's understood metrics within technology.
Nice picture
And I've
of the
raised
building.
$30 million myself for my companies. Every conversation is about why the vision is there and why they need to take action on that vision. And so it's always a conversation because there's no underlying asset.
Now,
That's my take.
Hugh, when you work with a family office, does it give them more comfort to work with a broker-dealer?
Well, first of all, I would think that the
From
family...
a compliance standpoint.
Well, you know, listen, all the family offices have their own, you know,
Right.
the wealthy people have their own people that are going to make the final decisions. But I would say that we're in the very early stages of proving this out to the family offices, but a deal is a deal. It's predicated on the deal. And I don't think they're going to fly in. I mean, You know, there's a couple deals right now that I believe are great family office deals, but maybe they're not big enough. You know, families when they come in, maybe they want to come in for 10 or 15. So we're trying to match the right, but like I said, I think the assumption, and right now I'm playing the role that I'm kind of the conduit to the families.
Sure.
I do believe, though, you know, like I look today and I'm saying, you know, Elon Musk is putting, you know, rockets into space, and 78% of all advertising digital dollars go through Google. I mean, all the Fortune 100 companies, Procter & Gamble, they all go through Google and through Facebook. There's an evolution, and I think, and Darren is definitely a pioneer. I think that one day, guys like, you know, Peter and myself, we will be extinct. I think that what Darren's trying to do, and there's other people out there as well, I think there will be a day when a button will come in there and there'll be less and less people like myself. But I think that's, the technology's there. I don't think the acceptance and the provability is there yet, but it will be one day.
You know, in 1930, 8% of the people in America had a refrigerator. Everybody else had an ice box. I actually, just tell you how old I am, I remember as a boy seeing an ice truck. They would bring a big block of ice and put it in your ice box. In 1940, only 30% of the people had a refrigerator. So only 22% in 10 years, even though it would make ice, you know. So it takes a while for everything to happen. But here's a question for all of you. I get a lot of calls from people that don't have a dime. They got a great idea, or they've got this, or they got that. I'm sure Darren gets a lot of calls like that too. You know, I'll give you some stock, or I'll, you know, can I pay you on the backside? And you know, what do you do? Is there any way for a company that has no money to do crowdfunding? I mean, no money.
Look, anything is possible, but to be practical, you know, I'm a very pragmatic guy. Concepts are hard to fund.
You got to have money, right?
And if you have an angel, or if you have someone who wants to back you and then bring you to market, that's another thing. But we look at the basics, you know, very fundamentals. You know, do you have the right management team? Is there some proof of concept that you have a marketable product or service? Is there any traction in the market? And if those exist, then you still don't have any money, you've got an opportunity.
If you can show like quarter over quarter user growth or something like that, then that's different, right?
Some demonstrated
You had
traction.
100,000, you had 10,000 last month, and you had 100,000 people on your website this month, and then next month you think you're going to have a couple of 100,000. Then that's saleable. Maybe.
One of my favorite sayings, Gene, is you know, everything big started to happen or started to start as something small. Okay, so I'm an entrepreneurial spirit. I've been one for 30 years, and so you know there's a practical approach to this, and it may be that you have to start with friends and family to do a round there.
Yeah.
You know, one of my philosophical views about crowdfunding, where I think there's a lot of lack of education here, is it's not a one and done. In my opinion, you look at crowdfunding, it's a series of tranches of capital. Like I love the Legion story where they did a Title III, and then they did a 506, and now they're on a Reg A.
Yeah, but even with the Title III, they had several $100,000 to start with.
Right. Agreed. But to the point of, and maybe you only raise a little bit of money there, but you use that to springboard, and also to test the proof that your concept is crowdfundable.
Right.
And then you get to a point, especially if you're going public, which is my forte, where then you have access to all types of different capital. And as long as you don't make a critical mistake in how you structure those tranches of capital, you have a great opportunity for sustainability. So, you know, you may have to start off with, you know, the uncle, the friend, the family, whatever it may be, to do almost like David's approach, you know, to prove it out. It doesn't take a lot of money to prove out whether you're a viable
Well, now that brings up a point. I have clients that had previously spent money on advertising, and they got nothing. They would say, we gave the guy $10,000 and we got nothing.
Unprovable, though.
You know, what do you do about that?
There's a handful of advertising agencies that I would recommend, and if you want recommendations, I'll give you them. They're experts in it. Darren's one of them. There's guys that have done $200 million of Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns. So if you go to any person that doesn't know it, they're going to learn.
You got to have a track record.
But going to your question is, I think if someone doesn't have the ability to come up with even $10,000 to kind of fund their starting point, they're not looking at it realistically.
Shouldn't quit their day job.
You know, you actually were the one that came up with it for me, which is You fund the test, we fund the rest,
Yeah.
and I like that. So,
I'm an old ad guy, what can I say?
yeah, so,
You fund the test, we fund the rest.
don't get me wrong, that's going to be on our website soon. So, but the concept is there, right? You want me to put 50 to 150 grand into your company without you guys even putting in 10 grand? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So even us who will fund and go really heavy on the risk side,
What about if it's
only
like a
they come
really
in.
beautiful blonde with a startup? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Maybe we better go to the questions on that one.
But I think that you got to come to this realistically, and I think that the only way to realistically get execution on the digital side is if you have money and you have a great firm working for you with that money.
Great team.
Yeah, I mean it's anything, right?
Yeah.
So
have some
you want to
money
give
and
your
a
money
great
to the
team and a
best.
great story to tell.
Yeah.
So you really need a combination of everything to be successful at it, and you need smart guys helping them, right? Yeah. On that, why don't we take a few questions? Everybody wants to go for cocktails.
Right, they're ready for cocktails.
Don't give me a break. We're going to have a drink. Give me a break, right?
There's a question in the back.
There's one back there. Can we give him a mic? There, somebody?
Oh, the mic's up on the computer.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Solve a challenge for me. For an issuer, the CPA doesn't make any sense to go and get an investor. For a platform, the CPA spread across 5 or 10 issuers makes perfect sense, but the platform isn't willing to take the bet on funding CPAs for companies. Figure it out.
Well, they will. Some have platforms where some of the platforms have programs where if you have some sort of traction, they may help you with your marketing budget. But you have to be able to prove pretty well that you're really going to be successful, that you've already reached certain milestones. No.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that this is another way that I'm seeing mistakes in the industry is what you just said, which is a CPA for an issuer doesn't make sense. It depends on the product that you're selling, but if you think about it, any company needs to go out and market their product. That's just starting, right? I mean, that's just business, and we all know business. And so you have to go spend that budget one way or the other. So the way I look at it is if you got to spend the budget, you might as well go through this process that these guys in here have set up, which is Title III or Reg A, and get a license to hunt and go get investors because it's a new upsell funnel. If you know internet marketing, they love upsell funnels, which is if you like this product, you'll like this product. And so if you really look at a digital security, what we're selling, those people have to go market their product and get eyeballs on their company anyways, and they might as well then just add that additional funnel into their sales process to then give the people that are buying their product an option to invest into their company. So I think it's all about they got to spend the money, might as well spend it wisely and get some investors alongside of it.
Got a man back there holding the mic?
So just let me give a little
Oh,
input
sorry,
to Blaine,
go
'cause I think it's a great question. Again, one of the mistakes I think people make is that they rely on the platform to do all of that work for them. They're under the expectation that I got this great platform, they're either registered or they're a broker dealer, and they're going to fix all my troubles. They're going to take care of everything.
Not going to happen.
And it's just one of those things that is part of the learning curve, and that's specific to the platform, right? Some of them are broker dealers who come from a perspective of we want to take you out and market you, we want to do an outreach program, and they want to work directly with an agency. Others just want to put up your offering and then the issuer's on their own. So I think a lot of that is the selection process and then understanding and picking your platform based upon the expectations that the issuer believes they'll deliver and interviewing them well and qualifying what they will or won't do for the issuer.
I want to ask a question that get your feedback on this type of strategy for an emerging entrepreneur. This is using the lean startup kind of approach. Lean startup where you have a minimum viable product.
Yep.
Then you take it to market for a market niche as sort of a test of the market, but not just test the market to see if your business concept really has the viability or the way of getting traction. Is a crowdfunding kind of approach a really good way to do that, meaning to find out if you have the first avenue to find your market niche and to prove the viability or to prove that you have traction? And how would you go about that if you do?
Yes, the answer is yes. It's the best. I Matter of fact, this is, I think, the best way for companies to do the MVP, Eric Ries, lean startup mentality. And the reason being is it could literally cost you $10,000 to figure out if you have a market for your product. You create a really good video, the product doesn't even exist yet, and you put it up in front of people, you find your tribe, you find your audience, and those people are saying, yes, I would be willing, on Kickstarter, it's a rewards platform, I'd be willing to not even get equity in your company just to fund a future version of that video or that product that I just saw. So I think it is the true evolution of Eric Ries's stuff on Lean Startup, which is the concept of the minimal viable product. It's truly now a video, and get people to see the video, and if they want to buy it, good. And if they don't want to buy it, great. Then I'm moving on to the next company. So I'm seeing innovation around the idea of like new product lines. If you think about Home Shopping Network is what it used to be, where you would literally just put up videos of companies' product types and see if the market will demand that. And if they do, then you build the product all the way through. And if they don't, then you move on to the next video and show someone something else to see if there's a market for it.
And the best thing about doing it as a donation campaign is you don't have all those regulatory expenses to contend with. You can test it much cheaper that way.
I have a question about the family houses that you were.
Family offices?
Family offices, yes.
Yeah.
One of their primary concerns is privacy.
Yeah.
And privacy and crowdfunding can be a contradictory concept for family offices. And so how have you...
What's my approach towards the
yeah,
family
how do you
offices?
deal with that? Because
Well-
they're used to the idea of a broker
Sure.
dealership is private. It's
Well-
between them and the I mean, it's private relatively speaking, right?
Well,
Compared to this.
first
So
of
how do
all,
you deal
yeah,
with
most of the families do have a certain sense of anonymity, and there's some that you're just not going to bring out. Some that I can't get to. I'm always trying to climb over the walls. Next month, I'm doing something in Washington. I'm going to Dubai and then Germany just to meet new families, right? And then when you meet them, which takes a while, then you have to bring them the confidence. The one thing, it's just like everything else, is you're only as good as your last deal. If you don't feel that the deal, I take things a little bit later than both these gentlemen. It's stuff that I have is already tested and it's already to the next stage, which does not eliminate them from crashing and burning. But you really have to take, when you walk into that room with third generation, or the other day I was with the heir to the Campbell Soup fourth or fifth generation family, and I have a really good deal in front of them. It was a life science deal, and it was a Bayer drug that failed, and all these super scientists. But you still sit there and say, oh gosh, there's just what happens if this one deal blows up? This guy's the heir. I'm with the guy that I could have a relationship with 20 years. So here's two things that we do. When I do videos, and say for a public company, private company, and I'll distribute that video. First of all, our model is not we did not build the company and say let's build this website and everybody will come. I said I'll build great content. I'm at the exchanges, I go to events. I have great hosts. They're all CNN or former, Bloomberg hosts. So I create the content. What I do is I go back to Harvest Exchange, Business Insider, Bloomberg, Street.com, and I go there with the content, okay? So that's the first part. But when it comes to the families, I'll go to, say, the Family Office Network, which is one of our strategic partners, and they're in West Palm in New York. When I distribute the video there, I'll distribute directly to some families I know, but a lot of times I'll put it through the network, and they'll come to me when they're interested. Or in the case I have a strategic partnership with Darren, when I come on, just like Dave, I'm part of his marketing team. When he brings me on, he'll say, as part of that deal, here's the company, if you like it, I want a one-on-one, maybe at Kramer Levin or, at Pepper, one of the law firms or Foley. I'll sit there and have 20 or 25 families and do a presentation. And then there's another art to that. I have to know which families, some families get along and some don't. So it's always, in that case, just like he does his he shoots down, he understands what he's doing, and he has his, one of the things I take great pain is to make sure that I deliver that in a special way so that I'm around to evolve with that. I hope that's helpful.
I also see that that's changing, by the way. Just a little slightly different perspective that used to be the family offices were very elusive. They didn't want to be known. They didn't want to be found. That's changing, where now they're actually looking for deal flow because there's more money than there is good quality deals. And so there are family offices that are raising their hands and saying, please show us a good deal. Now, that's about selectivity and being careful. You want to establish a relationship with them first and then bring them something. But to me, I see that evolving just because there really are a shortage of great quality deals out there, depending on the criteria of the family office, right? So one may like tech, one may like real estate, it's all different.
They all have a sweet spot, don't they?
But I am really seeing that they're raising their hands these days.
And then just, to add to what you're saying, a lot of times you had a family that, they had Peter represented the family and the matriarch or patriarch, and then you gave it to your son. What happened was it was not healthy for the bloodline. So they were not getting, if you really look at the family offices in general, they missed out on the whole internet. I mean, you'll hear about a couple families, but what family guy who's made a living off of these families is going to tell them to invest in this company with no earnings, no outlook for earnings, got some revenues, and you got a couple kids with 3 or 4 years outside of Stanford running this company, and they've raised $5 billion. Nobody's going to put it on the line, but now it's changed. So now, but that evolution, some families, like you said, are raising hands. The others will open the family up and say, we want to do something we've never done in life science, but we are only going to go in if 2 or 3 other families come in, and they mitigate their risk to that, to that order. So it's a different animal.
And it is, and it's also portfolio diversification. One of the things that I really get excited about with this is a new asset class. And if you take, whether it's 5% or 10% of your overall portfolio, and especially a family office, where you realize this is high risk, early stage, high reward, well, you want to diversify a portfolio inside of your equity class of equity crowdfunding or your asset class, which is a combination of debt and equity. But this is just the Warren Buffett simple approach, right? Diversification, diversification. So I think that plays in with all investors, but especially with some of the family offices that are coming from old school.
Well, and it's critical too. So I think it was Dillinger that said, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is, right? So that's the key. It's you rob the banks, in that case, the family offices, get them to invest, because without that, we're not going to ever get any real traction. So think about it this way. A digital offering, if you will, a digital security from the marketing perspective, maybe does $1 to $5 million consistently on a deal that has good traction and good CPAs. The rest of it has to come from institutional dollars. It just, I mean, there's no way it can't. And so once that money gets into this game, that's when this thing becomes explosive. And I believe, and my hypothesis has always been, that the smart money should look towards what the crowd's doing first. So right now, there's a hesitancy to invest when the crowd's investing, but it's all wrong. It's the opposite. They should always invest once the crowd does, because the crowd is the best indicator of momentum. And if there's a good traction, and by the way, it's also the indicator of, will there be a public liquidity market for this, right? So you have 2,000 investors in there. Your average float will trade at $500,000 a year. A day. And so think about it that way. A Reg A is getting you more than 2,000 investors. You're guaranteed a float when you go public. So there's a lot of synergies, but it only happens in a big way when guys like you and Darren and others get in and get the family money and institutional dollars in.
Blaine, we'll take one more, okay?
It's a short follow-on question. On this topic of family offices and sort of related small institutions, do you think that's the place to go because that's where the money is in general, or do you think that's the place to go because the family offices who used to do all their investing through funds have gotten tired of the funds and are now going direct? Is it a change from getting fund money to family money, or is it a family money and fund money kind of a question?
Well,
Does that make sense?
I could tell you right off the top, the one thing families do not like to do is pay fees. I mean, and they feel that they don't have to, and that they don't like to, if that's any help.
I'd say yes and yes.
Okay. And I'm getting a signal that we have a couple of people having withdrawal symptoms back there, so we better wrap it up. And we want to thank you very much for this opportunity to be here today.